Oh, darn it. There we go.
This is Hits 106, Nassau, the Bahamas.
Unbelievable.
The time is 4 o'clock when the nation starts to free the mind, free the mind. Hear our heavy shows on the airwaves, but not like free your mind. Just the every dial you will find, not like free your mind. From the ghetto to the office, hustlers, students, and college, from the pews to parliament, all the freedom of the time. I got to free my mind. It really is you will find. The time is far. I got to free my mind. Got to free soul. It really is you will find. It's about that time. Oh, I got free my mind. It's about that time. Oh, I got free my mind. It's about that time. Oh, I got free my mind.
Afternoon, y'all. Y'all ready to rock and roll? There we go. Star 106 hits. Yes, indeed. Welcome to another Wellness Wednesday. Yours truly, the Natural Empress. It is Free of Mind, brought to you courtesy of KFC. Thank you to Pinder Tile and Muffler World. Cost right and its membership. Don't forget, it has its advantages. Sign up today. Thank you, of course, to Lactogen 3, distributed by Lightborns Trading and discount distributors and Produce Express. Yes, indeed. Quick good afternoon to everybody on the FM band. We are 106.5. We're channel 976 on cable. Thank you to you guys tuning in on cable. And then, of course, on our social media platforms Facebook, we are Star 106 and Natural Empress on Facebook. All right. So it's Wellness Wednesday. No, we're not talking to the doctor. But today I have a very special guest by the name of Anya, who has so courageously come on to tell her story on the heels of the murder/suicide that occurred last weekend, the signs to look for. And so many women across the length and breadth of our country have experienced the turmoil that that young lady suffered in her very short life, and the signs to look for when it comes to dealing and living with, or possibly even being married to, a narcissist. So today I want to say special thank you to Anya before we even get started, for being so brave to tell your story. You must be PLP.
No, I wouldn't call it brave. I said to you, my interest in sharing is just to help someone if I can possibly, and with some of the information that I have in relation to procedures and guidelines that you follow, depending on the nature of your circumstances. I know a lot of persons might not be aware of some of the steps that they can take. So just to be able to share that information and possibly help someone means a lot to me. And if it can save a life, that's it. That's awesome.
Thank you so much, Anya. So let's start from the fairy tale. You meet this Prince Charming that you decide. I think that's where we could take it from, because at some point there was a time where you actually loved or were in love with this person, correct?
Very much so. I was actually one of those persons who was not pegged to get married. So when people heard that I was married, they were like flabbergasted. They're like, "And you're married with kids? Are you kidding me? He
Oh
must
wow.
be really special."
Oh wow.
But he was, for me, he was, and he came into my life at a point, at a very low point. And I think in situations like that, you tend to, or in situations where you're dealing with narcissistic men or domestic violence situations, you tend to find that the women themselves are at a low point. And usually they're targeted by persons like that because those persons recognize, or they see a deficiency in you that you might not even see within yourself. And
Absolutely.
that was kind of my situation going into the relationship. My sense of value was not at an all-time high at all. And of course he came in and he made me feel like I was on top of the world. He wasn't, it didn't start out ill-intended. He didn't start out mean or anything like that. There were red flags in the beginning, if I'm going to be honest.
And
But
looking
like
back,
again, like I admitted early on, when you're that young and coming off of the heels of your own trauma and not having resolved a lot of the issues that you need to resolve as an adult yourself, you find yourself sometimes in situations that turn out to not be the ones that you want to be in. And that was my case. When we got
how
married,
old were you, if you don't mind?
pardon me,
How old were you?
uh, 12 years ago when we got married, 15 years, I was about 23. I was
Okay,
about
young.
23 going on 24. And we started dating, and I ended up pregnant very early on in our dating phase. We dated for another almost 2 years after that, and then we decided to get married. I told him, if we already have one child, if we're gonna continue on, then that would be the natural progression. You want to do the adult thing and be
The right thing.
responsible and try to be, mature and decent. So that was my reason, and I said, if we're not gonna do that, then let's part ways. And a couple of, not even, I think, a full 3 months after that, he proposed. And we decided that we would get married. We didn't have a wedding. I didn't want one. We, in my mind, we couldn't afford one, so it didn't make sense. We went to the JP. It was just a love that we both felt, and it didn't have anything to do with the show and the pomp and circumstance that you see for a lot of persons, or that a lot of persons would go after in terms of getting married and wanting the whole wedding and that showstopper event. It wasn't about any of that for me. It was genuinely just about the love. And it just turned into something else over time. He turned into to be someone else over time. He actually turned out to be someone that I thought I knew but didn't know at all, even right down to his real name.
My
So
God.
the name that I knew him as from I met him was not the name that he was given at birth. And I didn't find that out until about 7, 8 years after we were married. And that was only
Crazy
because
how
I
that.
investigated and did some digging of my own. It wasn't voluntarily shared by his adopted parents or himself. So after finding that out and realizing that I'm dealing now with someone who's probably a bit broken and damaged, and myself knowing what that feels like, and putting in the work over the years to try to be a better version of myself, which is something I do every year. I reflect and I say, this year this is what I can do different to be better in this new year coming. And I would suggest that to him. And I would say, well, you should try this, or even right down to getting him a job and getting him reinserted back into society was a challenge. My bosses at the time were really great people, and I went to one of my bosses and he was like, "Oh, he needs a job. That's fine, no problem. I'm gonna send him. Tell him to go see the manager down by so and so." And all he had to do was show up. It didn't matter. He had a job. He didn't even show for the interview. So there was a part of him that just detached from wanting to even participate in society.
And just
I would
progress.
I would I would say to him, let's go out for dinner. Oh, who paying for it? In my mind, you don't work, so we already know I paying for it. But let's go. We married. This is what married people do. We spend time together, or we should be wanting to spend time together, trying to develop the relationship. But he completely shut down. And then he tried to isolate me. He tried to isolate me from my family members, from my friend, or he liked none of my friends.
None.
Everyone was a bad person or something else. and
I
my
know.
and my family, oh, he couldn't stand none of them. My mom, my dad, nobody in my family he liked. So,
But did they
but
even like him? Is the question.
I doubt it. And that was something I come to realize over time. You can't like yourself. if you can't even see better for yourself and want it for yourself, I think for you to like yourself, that's like a fundamental that you should want better for yourself or want to see yourself elevate. And if you can't see that, then you can't really like yourself very much. I think
Is
that's
it
an
that
indicator.
is it that you felt when you identified all of this brokenness, did you feel, and I'm sure the answer is yes, but I just want to hear you say it. Um, did you feel as if the love that you had for him would help him? That was supposed to elevate him. The love that you had for him was supposed to make him want to be a better person.
At this time in the marriage, to be honest with you, no, I didn't. When I found out what I found out, I didn't think that there would be absolutely anything that I can do to make him better. Only him could decide that he wanted to be better. And this is something that I always said to him. I said, I could give you all the love you feel you need in the world, and you could define what that should look like and feel like. And I could try my best to articulate and emulate that for you. But at the end of the day, if you're not making these decisions for yourself, it doesn't matter. I don't
All right,
matter, and neither do our kids.
I can let you take that call. We're going to take a quick break right here. Of course, this is Free of Mind. Woo, what do I call this? I said a Wellness Wednesday. I have to take a break
Sorry, but I didn't. For me, I didn't think that it would help. No,
at all.
I don't think no amount of love in the world would have helped him. He had to be
But
willing to
but
make that up
but
in his mind.
the love obviously was great enough at that point for you to stay.
It was a For me, it wasn't just the love that I had for him. I looked at both of my kids, especially my baby, and knowing the attachment that he had to his father, given his condition. He's autistic.
Okay,
I didn't want to create, because in all of my research and studies with autism, and in my sessions with psychiatrists and counselors, they would always say routines were very important for children with autism. And when you
yeah,
interrupt those routines, you could actually cause them to digress in their progress.
gotcha.
So there were a lot of factors involved for me, not just how I felt about him, but how I felt about my children, and bigger than
Hold
that,
on,
what
hold on,
I
Anya.
would have
Hold
liked
on,
to see overall.
hold on, hold on. We're going live again.
Arkansas's home for new hit music.
Star 106 hits. This is Free of Mind on a Wellness Wednesday. We're checking into the mind, we're checking into the membrane. We're trying to find out exactly what life is like when it comes to living with a narcissist and what it means to be in a very abusive relationship. And when I say abusive, it could be just to your mind, just to your psyche. So of course, Anya is on. She's telling her story. We're still in La La Land somewhat. I think we're kind of taking a curve. We're going around the bend right now, where things start to change. You found out that his identity is totally different from what you were introduced to. You found out that he has a different name. Obviously, that in itself must have made him a broken person if he's not come to grips with the fact that he was adopted. Um, so the change is gradually coming. What was the big red flag as you bank the curve?
Well, for me, the last 3 years of my marriage, I had already checked out. I was just still sitting there trying to actually, to be honest with you, I wasn't sitting there trying to figure out anything. I stopped trying to figure it out. I just started praying in the last 3 years of my marriage. And my prayer in the last 3 years of my marriage was, Father, if I'm the problem, move me. If he's the problem, move him. But I don't see any way that I could control the outcome of this situation to the betterment of my kids, myself, or him. And so that was my prayer for 3 years. I just prayed and rested on faith.
Yeah, but how did you relate? It's one thing to pray and wait for God to reveal the truth and the answer. But how did you relate in the meantime? Were you still trying to be the loving wife, the catering wife? Were you intimate? All those things. What did you do in those 3 years?
Well, I'll be honest with you, and I listen to Don't Do It all the time, I'll admit. So when Rika says, as a wife, you're obligated to sleep with your husband, I was obligated to sleep with my husband in my mind. That for me, it wasn't a separation. And another reason why I didn't rush the divorce has a lot to do with the way that I feel spiritually. There were some things that I couldn't reconcile for myself spiritually. A lot of people get married and they say, "Oh, I don't like this person no more. I want a divorce," but they don't realize when you get married, that's a covenant not just between yourself and that person, but a covenant that you make between yourself and God. So whether they're doing what they're supposed to do or not, at the end of the day, that doesn't concern you because you're not giving account for their actions. You're only giving account for your own.
Wow.
And so for me, I couldn't reconcile certain things spiritually, even, which is why I had to take it to my creator. And I say, God, whatever this out. So in that meantime, I would sleep with my husband, but I wouldn't enjoy it. And he knew that. And I would tell him, I said, listen, how you want me to enjoy something when I don't even know who you are? I don't even know who I sleeping with.
That's real.
And on the flip side of that, after you don't speak to me the way you speak to me, I supposed to still feel the same way. Like you call me out my name in front of the kids. This is a regular
Okay, so we
occurrence.
gotta get into that now. When the fluff is over now, let's get into the nitty-gritty when change really started to come.
Change for me started to come within probably, I'd say, 5 years of the last 12 of my 12-year marriage. The first two of that five, my prayer was, Lord, fix him or move him. The last three was, Father, if I'm the problem, just move me. I stopped even making the prayer about him. To answer Ace's question, I wouldn't consider it marital rape because I consented. Whether I enjoyed it or not was a different
That's a different
story, but I
question.
consented.
Sorry.
And I consented because, again, at the end of the day, I took my vows seriously when I made them. And I recognized that my covenant was not just with him, but with my creator. So whether he do that's because people say, well, how you work for 15 years and take care of him and he didn't work and he didn't, it had
Yeah,
nothing.
let's talk about that because if we're gonna get spiritual, right, and live by the good book, he, as the head of the household, should have been pulling his weight. Like, why
By
did
the
you
sweat
think
of
that
a
was okay?
man's brow shall he eat, right?
Man, I weak. How did you see that to be okay that he was not pulling his weight? Did that not make you love him any? I was there too, so don't get me wrong. I'm poking finger at you.
Well,
How
I'll say this.
so long?
We were together for an entirety of 15 years, 12 of them married. The first 3 years of that relationship, he had his own company. The first almost 2 years, he had his own company. And him and his business partner ended up in some situations and the business dissolved. After that dissolved, he couldn't figure up from down, left from right. He couldn't put himself back together and he just never did. And
Right, right.
so for me, I'm like, okay, maybe he just need a minute. Maybe he just needs, so I'm gonna give him the minute. I go into work, we still got bills to pay. So I went to work. By the
Good
time as I
woman.
was having my second child, he still didn't find a job yet, and the oldest boy was already in school. And I'm like, hey, listen, we on child number two now. What you can do? Oh, but he's special. And his excuse always was the baby because the baby's autistic. Oh, he's special needs, and oh, we can't just send him any and everywhere. And listen, school fees was no joke for the baby. Paying $800 a month was no joke. So you get two kids in school, you get all these bills, mortgage, light, all this stuff, but he still can't figure out what he wants to do, what he's going to do. I even made offers to help him start up a new business and fund it. His thing was, I ain't cleaning nobody yard because I too good for that. And, you know, the pride thing kicked in, right? And it was just like a never ending roller coaster with him. And last year, it got to the point coming into our 12th anniversary. I'm like, something, you want us to do something, you plan it, I'll show up. I'm just exhausted at this point. And like I told him, I said, as long as I'm talking, you don't got nothing to worry about. Is when I stop talking, is when you need to worry.
Problem. Right.
About 2 years now, I don't have nothing to say. You be arguing and be having these arguments by yourself because I don't have nothing to say. Because I tired. I tired saying the same thing over and over. I tired doing the same thing over and over. So if you want to continue down that path, that's fine for you, but I'm not going to engage. And I just stopped engaging. And he,
Didn't
I
that
guess,
infuriate him even more?
I'm sure it did, which is why we ended up to the point that we did. And I really believe that this was an act of God. People might say, oh, she have to be insane. But at that point when it happened, I couldn't see any other way out of this situation. Keeping my house, keeping my kids, just getting away from him and keeping everything that I built still intact to a degree. When he pulled those two guns on me, like maybe 4 hours before our 12th anniversary, I'm like, in the middle of it all now, I'm like,
Well,
hey, this
what
a
was the
fight.
reason? What did you do or say that made him mad?
I just wasn't responding to nothing that he had to say. I wasn't answering none of his questions. I wasn't having a conversation. I was on my phone. And he was like, oh, so you don't have nothing? And I'm like, no. And I was just like, no. And then I went back on my phone and he's like, oh, you think this is a game? I'll kill you in here. I'm like, and I said to him, and I said, something, if that's what you feel you need to do, just go right on ahead. Go ahead. Do what you could do. Do your best. At this point, he goes down the hallway and gets these two guns that he has in my house. And I'm like, he's still here? So then I proceed to freak out now because I'm like, these shouldn't even be in my house.
Right.
And we ended up in a physical altercation. I got both guns at one point, and I tried to kill him unsuccessfully. Um, but because the safety was on both guns. So at this point now, by the time as I get the second gun, he's back at me trying to fight me for this gun. So we're fighting back and forth for this gun. And I just let him have it. And then he took both guns and he stashed them somewhere in the house after that, after he realized either I can shoot her tonight or she probably can shoot me. So I better put these up. So I went in the kitchen and I got my knife. And I'm like, okay, you put the guns up, we still could finish this, because you done get me all riled up. Now I didn't come home for this tonight. I done had a nice lunch date with my girlfriend. We had a really good time. I ain't come home for none of this tonight. But if you really want to play this game, let's do it. Let's go all out. So we proceeded into an all-out fight. I ended up with some bruises. He ended up with one or two scratches. I went to the station. I filed a complaint when I left the house. And that next day, I didn't go back home that night. I went to my father's house, picked up the kids, and well, my baby, because he was still adult. I picked him up, went to my father's house where my other son was, and I went to bed, cleaned up my wounds as best as I could. My oldest son was at my father's house at the time, and the baby was at home with us. And after everything, the baby ended up with me, and we both ended up at my father's house as well. That next morning, I took left my father's house and came to my aunt's house. Left my kids at my aunt's house and went home to get some stuff. Lo and behold, who was at home? Him, laying down in bed, fast asleep. And the only thing that came to my mind is I probably should go in the kitchen and get my knife again and try to kill him and then, clean up my house and cook me a nice dinner and sit down and eat and then call the cops when I'm done. And I'm like,
This
okay.
is a real men kind of movie, right?
I'm like, okay, no, Anya, but the boys, if you do that, what's going to happen to the boys? So, like, my common sense at that point kicked in and I'm like, okay, I'm not going to do that. I left the house again and I didn't go back. Now, when I went to go and get my boys again, I ended up running into him. The boys were not with me at this time. And the CID officers called me like maybe about 20 minutes after that. And they're like, hey, Mrs. Chase, we were just calling to see if you knew where your husband was. I was like, yeah, I just ran in there about 20 minutes ago. He right down there where he always is. And I gave them the location. They went and they like, Bill, we're going to need you to meet us to the station, okay? Just for ID purposes. I was like, not a problem. So they arrested him. That everything happened that Saturday night, Sunday morning, 4 day. Like this is like between 11 and 2 in the morning. And then they arrested him that day before sundown. So he spent almost 2 weeks incarcerated. We went Monday was the confrontation at CID. Tuesday was the court date. And I got a lawyer that Monday after I left CID and I went to my attorneys. Explained the nature of the case to them and they advised me. And I was like, okay, fine. I'm going to leave him there because me and him had a conversation after the confrontation at CID and he's asking me to drop the charges. And I'm like, I
Okay,
don't
that's
know.
what I was gonna ask you.
I'm like, I don't know. We gonna have to see, but that I was like, because if we can do that, then I gonna want something from you. I gonna want you to let me go, like completely, or I ain't dropping no charges. You going to jail.
So
He's like,
pick
if
your
you want,
poison.
he's like, if you want to move on, I'll let you go. And of course, at this time, he's saying anything to save his life. So when I met with my attorneys advised me. They said, you know something, you don't have to drop the charges right away. Whether you drop the charges in the first hearing or not, you still have the opportunity to do so if they adjourn it and you go to the second hearing. At least give yourself some time to think before you make any hasty decisions. So what I did is I didn't when we went to court that Tuesday, I didn't drop the charges, even though he was expecting me to, and he was upset. That Wednesday, he went up to jail because nobody signed his bail. I called his parents. They refused to sign his adopted parents. They refused to sign his bail. And some of his friends had to come together over a 2 week period to collect his bail to get him out. In that interim, I was speaking with one of his brothers, and I told him, I said, listen, I'm gonna clean up all of his clothes and I'm gonna pack them up and I'm gonna get them to you and I'm gonna give you an envelope for him. So I washed all of his clothes, put them in a folded them neatly, put them in a suitcase, wrote him a nice note, put $100 in the envelope with the note, and I put it on the top of the clothes in the suitcase and I gave it to his brother. Mind you, this man ain't working like almost 15 years, Empress. Where he getting money from? He just coming out jail. He need something to eat. I ain't inhumane, you know.
You're special.
So, so I did that, and then since then we've been in this whole back and forth. He has these moments where I guess he's out drinking with his friends, where he calls my phone and I gave him a whole car too, so that he could visit his kids. Yeah.
Hold on, back up, sister, back up. I can say it like we say in the Bahamas, reverse back. You did what?
All right. At that time, I had two vehicles, right? The
Okay,
ve-
mine and mine.
the vehicle that I gave him was a vehicle that I really didn't drive in about 2 or 3 years, and I had no interest in driving it, and I really wanted it out
Matter.
my yard. So I'm like, listen, you keep that one, get the paperwork sorted out, and you could have that, okay? Actually, the arrangement was he was supposed to pay me for the car, but I know he couldn't afford it. So that was only like talking on air. That ain't talking to hear yourself. I collected all the $70 out of an $800 agreement. You
I'm
know,
reading some of these comments as we go along. One Rice is asking, "Are you from the Bahamas?" First
born and
question.
bred in Nassau, so
Uh, this one says, "It's so nice to see that women are speaking up. I encourage men as well who are in domestic violence relationships to speak out until we free our minds and have uncomfortable conversations. Then and only then can we change this violence culture." And yeah, I'm just blown by your story. I don't even know. So I'm now at the court. I'm standing there with you now. I'm sitting in the back bench here, waiting to, hear the judge say, "Well, you know what? You ain't dropped the charges." His face
well,
dropped. You could
let
see
me
the
tell you
smoke coming out his ears,
before we get
and
to that part, what I did within that initial week of everything happening, we went to court that Tuesday. That Thursday, my divorce was filed.
oh,
Yeah, they gave us an adjourned date for October. Okay, and so that means he was out on bail until October. So during this time, he's like, you can drop the charges, what you could do, trying to play nice. And then when he get drunk, when he hanging out with his friends, he calling me, oh, you think this a game? You breaking up our family? You really trip out, you going crazy. You need to come back. We need to make up. We need to. And I'm like, no, I ain't never coming back. This done. And you done signed the paperwork. Move on with your life, buddy. Okay, you want to see the kids? Call me. We could set that up. That no problem. They your turn. They go always be your turn. I can't change that. I mightn't like you, but they your turn. So
oh,
we went to court in October, and like I say, my divorce been in February when all of this happened. I filed that same month. So
yes, you were finished.
yeah. So I was finished from years ago. Like I say, it was God, because that was my way out. That's how I saw. I'm like, wow, this man gonna pull a whole gun on me, and he don't know I get all the power in my hands. Like
Real.
really, I get to keep the house.
Okay, so we just lost her right there. Y'all think he pulled the plug? We're going to take a quick break right here. When we come back, we'll talk more with Anya. It's a Wellness Wednesday right here. Free your mind. Star 106 hits. Boy, this ain't no joke. This ain't no joke. I didn't even, I never fathomed for the life of me that her story would have been so colorful. I swear to y'all. Mm. Ah, hold on. All right, she's back.
So
We
sorry. I
thought
think
we
we had
thought
I
he
think we had some
we
technical
thought he pulled
difficulties.
the plug.
Yeah, but in my mind, I'm saying I have all the power. Why would you even do something like this? You already don't have a job. I take care of you. Like, why would you do this to yourself? You realize you could lose everything? I guess it didn't make a difference to him.
Hold
So
on,
I'm
stop.
like, listen,
Pause. Because remember now, we have our radio audience to an eye on commercial break. So let me just get them back into the thick of things.
okay.
I remember when, I remember when I lost my mind. There was something so pleasant about that place.
I trying to figure out which one of y'all crazy. Is it him or is it you? I picked this song, right? But I don't know who I pick it for. I swear to you, girl. You have a different kind of heart. And when I say that, I laugh and I'm smiling because when I think of my own story, I would have done the same thing. The washing of the clothes, the giving of the car, the envelope on top of the nicely folded clothes. I, the other ass, would have do what you did. I'm just being real. So for all of those that say, "Well, mother's sick, how she do that?" This donkey would have done the same thing and did. So you know what? Let's roll.
And I know that you
Star 106 hits Gnarls Barkley right there with Crazy. And like I was telling you, Anya, I'm not sure who I'm playing the song for. Is it him? Or is it her? Because those that are on our social media feed, the comments are coming in. You know, everybody's saying we're going to call this Snap 242. This is the Bahamian version of LMN. And I'm sure there are many other women out there with stories like this that are even more colorful than yours. But I'm just so happy that you've decided to be so transparent and come on a show like this and tell your story. Because, like you said initially, your story could help somebody else to speak out. Your story can help somebody else to step out. Your story could actually save somebody's life. So here it is now. You filed for divorce. Man obviously is upset because I want you to believe when he pulled that gun on you, the two of them, even though it was two, he had no intention to shoot you. And why I say that is because when you went for the knife and he went and put the guns away in fear that you may use them on him, if he really wanted to kill you right then and there, when he relinquished the control by having those guns, he would have shot you, in which he didn't. You see what I'm saying?
But I get you. Like I tell you, for me, it was just an act of God. The way the whole thing transpired, it gave me my out, and I
But do
was
you know,
grateful for it.
speaking of that out, do you know, and I heard Christina Galanis on somebody sent me something today where she says, you know, she has yet to see a court case go straight through to the end. Women always here in the 242 end up at one point dropping those charges. And did you feel like that at one point that, you know what, this is my children, daddy, I can't do this to him?
Empress, let me tell you something. When it came to the criminal case, I went to my attorneys. They gave us an adjourned date for October. This everything backstory happened from February. When we went to court in October, I told them, I said, listen, I spoke with my attorneys. My attorneys said, you have the opportunity now to drop the charges if you want to. And they said, based on the nature of the charges that you have levied against him, you have to decide if you're willing to put the father of your children away for 10 or more years. My oldest son is 14. My baby is going to be 9 in March. If he goes away for 10 or more years, by the time he come out, they're adults. And they do have a relationship with their father. I'm not ever going to stand in the way of them having one with their father either. Like I said, at the end of the day, despite whatever differences we may have, us not seeing eye to eye, he's still their biological father and he still has a right to see them.
Okay,
And they
hold
have the
on.
right to see him.
Stick a pin on that. Yes, he is their biological father. But at no point did you feel, unlike myself, did you not feel that he's not good to himself. He ain't good to you. Why do you think he would be good to them? Did he display characteristics that made you feel comfortable enough to say, well, you know what? We have our differences, but he's going to be the best dad to them.
Well, I'll say this to you. I don't think I don't I get my son asked me the other day. He said to me, he said, "Mommy, why you say you're not a good parent?" I say, Saturi, I'll never be able to determine if I'm a good parent until you're an adult. Because
True.
my parenting skills won't be determined by what I'm doing for you right now. I'm not gonna, there's no book on parenting, and there's no one or two or three or four or five ways to parent. Each child is an individual unto themselves. So those circumstances vary based on individual. And I won't be able to determine if I was a good parent until you're an adult and I get to see the type of person you become in the world. That
Amen.
will say if I was a good parent or not. At this point, we can't determine that. You're still in my care.
Absolutely. But I'm saying the fact that you've deciding to allow him to still be an integral part of their lives, you're saying that he has some good qualities
When it
that
came to when it came down to his relationship with our sons, he had a very, very close relationship with our sons, especially the baby. Him being autistic, he took, I think, to a degree, the baby actually helped him become a little bit more patient than he originally was. Because when you're dealing with autistic children, that requires a whole different level of strength of character than you probably have to find dealing with a child that doesn't have those types of challenges. And it varies depending on where your child is on the spectrum. So I saw where he was very integral in the progression of our son and him getting certain fundamentals that he needed despite the fact that he had his challenge. So for me, I can't say the relationship that he has with our children is defined by the relationship that he and I have
was he not physical?
with me or the kids.
Both.
When it came to I did more spanking with them kids than he did. When it came down to me and him and physical, we had physical altercations between ourselves, and I'll be very honest about this. They weren't always his fault. They were sometimes on me because I have a temper, and I know that, and he's very provoking. That being said, um, the majority of the abuse was more psychological than anything, and I always tell people I rather told a cut hip than told a cut mine. It's so,
Absolutely.
people say you could heal a mind, but you can't heal a body. Most people don't realize you could, yeah, your mind will heal, but you'll never be the same person you was before all of it. Never. You never come back as that person. You're someone different. The way you see things, your perspective, everything changes. It's almost like you're a completely different person.
Absolutely.
So you have to get to know yourself even all over again. And when you're dealing with that type of mental toxicity, I like I said, at the end of the day, I rather told her cut it, give me some stitches or one band-aid. But the mental side of it is awful. And that was what I experienced more than anything. And because I went into it having already a sense of low self-worth, him saying certain things to me only further drove what I felt home for me. Because here it is now, I already believe a lot of these things about myself. I'm already self loathing. And here it is, he's saying these same things that I'm thinking about myself.
So he's just reiterating your thoughts.
Exactly.
Mhm.
So I had to learn to not be so hard on myself because I am my biggest critic. And I always tell him, I say, you could say these things to me. And you say it because I love you. This is why it has the impact that it has on me. If I didn't love you, I couldn't care what you I don't care what you think about me. If I don't know you, I don't care. You could think whatever you want to think about me. That's a loaded question, right? So
It's a good question.
it is. And I'll be
Even
honest,
to the point.
for me, my perspective is like this now. I'm not interested in being in a monogamous relationship. If I do a relationship, I want a polyamorous relationship.
Okay, so we're gonna bring you back on another date to talk about that because that is a topic all by itself, and you say it so casually, like you mean that.
I do.
Okay, let's continue with the story. We can talk about that later. So now, of course, divorce is now final.
No. See, and this is the part I wanted to talk about because this is the
Let's
part where I think some people are going to need some help. When he called me about maybe a month and a half ago, and I have a business partner because I'm in the process of starting up my own company, and he knows my business partner. So he called me and he's like, "Oh, I see you have them over to the house. Oh, tell him he better watch out. I have a warning for him and I have a warning for you and this and I have the conversation recorded so I could give that to my attorney if need be." But and that's another thing, ladies. Even if you don't intend to press charges, record it. Keep the recordings. Send them to your email. If it takes up too much storage in your phone, store it on a flash drive. These things are evidence that you can use later to prove what it is that you're saying is true. I just wanted to interject that. But he called, and after he did that, that was when I actually called Rika. And I'm like, Rika, I need to come on the show to talk about this because this ain't making no sense in this country. Went to magistrate's court because I have a divorce filed in the Supreme Court. You cannot file a bound over order or order of protection in magistrate's court as long as you have a Supreme Court matter pending. So what
say
you
what?
have to do, yeah, if you're in my like in a situation like mine where you've already filed for the divorce, you cannot go and just request a bound over order or a protection order from the magistrate's court. You have to go back to your attorney and actually swear an affidavit as to why you need to now have an emergency protection order put in place, and your attorney has to file that in the Supreme Court registry, and they have to grant that emergency protection order from the Supreme Court. So you just going and filling out your forms and trying to go through that process for yourself, don't do it. Don't waste your time if you have a divorce and talk to your lawyer. Tell them, listen, I need an emergency protective order. I get this my affidavit with the counts or what the threats or whatever it is, and me sign that and file that, please, with expediency. I have yet to even have my protection order filed because after he called threatening me, my business partner, I decided that I'm going to file the protection order, even though I dropped the charges on the advice of my attorney based on the nature of them and based on the ramifications. I'm knowing that I already have my divorce and I'm like, okay, this should be fine. I should be good. Nope, 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 nope. He calls and he threatens me. I'm still not protected.
So how do you feel? How do you feel even remotely safe speaking out like this, knowing that you're not safe?
But this is why it doesn't make a difference. I ain't safe anyway. So what difference it make if I speak out about it or not? Either which way, I ain't safe.
Point. But you know how infuriating this could be, knowing that we'll see it as you talking my business.
If he would feel like that, that's too bad. This my business too.
Point taken. I think I'll zip
I
my
live in
lip.
I live in this too. This my narrative too. This ain't just his narrative, and the choices that he make didn't only affect him, and it don't only affect me. It affects our children.
But you're the only one that's thinking about the children, obviously, because here it is. If he's still in this day, still threatening you, he's not over it. Whether he wants you back or his manhood is being challenged or his pride, whatever his ego, um, you're not safe.
And that's why to me it didn't make a difference if I come on here today or not, because either which way, I'm not safe. When I go home in the evenings, I make sure and I check my yard. I'm always vigilant of my surroundings, whether I'm home or not. That's just because of everything what's going on in our country. For my hopping, my eye, one of them chicks, I who's sitting up in her car looking in her phone. I ain't got time for that. My dog gotta be locked. I gotta pull off from where this is to get where I going.
Yeah, but okay. So here it is. We're. No, I don't want to use the word fearful as such. We're mindful of this man who was once my husband, my lover, my friend, who is the father of my children, who you still, in all of this, allow to have a relationship with his children. Do you
Well,
not see that as a problem?
Actually, he hasn't had a relationship with his children. I've allowed it, but he doesn't pursue one.
Well, that's a good thing.
Like I tell him, it's not for me to call you to see your children. It's not for me to bring your children to look for you. You have my number. If you want to see them, you know how to reach out. We can communicate like adults and make plans. But at the same time, I don't go looking for this man. I don't even if I see him somewhere, I don't even say, "Hey, you okay?" I don't care. If he was thirsty, I ain't even trying to spit in his mouth.
Yeah, but you're the same person folding clothes neatly and putting money on top of the clothing.
Hold on. That's put we
That's it.
understand your dynamic at that point in time. You coming out of this situation. I trying to be humane. I done did the humane thing now. Only thing I doing is moving on my life. What you doing or ain't doing ain't none of my business.
Whew, this is heavy. Letitia says he wants you more than he wants the kids.
I agree
You
with
agree?
that statement.
And you do realize that he wants you back like the Jackson Five.
I to be honest with you at this point, I haven't put a lot of thought into it. The last few months, I really haven't been putting any thought into it because I really don't care what he want. He's an outside of whatever if he call and he calls this habit of calling my phone from weird numbers, so I'll answer my phone not knowing who it is because I'm running a business, so I can't just say, oh, I ain't taking this call today. That could be my money call. You know what I
Hello.
mean? So when he calls and I answer the phone, he's like, hello. I'm like, hello. He's like, hello. I'm like, hello. I like, we were tired today. For every time he does that, right?
You
Then
have
he'd be like,
nothing
"Why you
to
gotta be like that?" I
say.
was like, "I already said hello. Why we gotta keep saying hello? What? Use Adele? I what? Lionel? What we doing?"
Man, not Adele though.
So I don't have no time. I don't put no thought at this point. I only have energy to put thought into what is important to me. He's not important to me, so I don't need to waste my energy thinking about him.
You think he just want to hear your voice?
Maybe I don't know. If
Does
that's the
he?
case, I could record him a whole note
I know, right? Just play it.
and
Yeah,
press
but
play when he would hear it.
does he call and say, "Well, Anya, I don't want to talk to you. Put my oldest on the phone." Like,
No,
do
because
you
my
ever,
oldest son has his own phone, and there's no need for him to call my phone to talk to him.
are you not afraid of the information, the thoughts that he may plant in your children's minds?
Nope.
How come?
I don't live my life in fear. I'm a praying woman, and I believe in my creator. He didn't create me to be scared of nothing or nobody. You's man, and what you can do? Kill me? I was born to die. Okay, if I dead today or tomorrow, I dead. That was my time. I live every day as if it's my last anyway, whether he was a factor or not. Because I don't know if it is. I could leave my house today and not reach home. And that's the way the world is. I lost my sister 2 years ago, Empress. Going on 2 years now. And losing her was hard. You know what I mean? We didn't expect to lose her. We didn't expect that to happen. And it just drove the point actually closer to home for me that life is that fragile. We don't have the time that we spend getting caught up in things that we have no control over is a waste of time. We're not living when we do that. We're not enjoying life.
Existing.
We just exactly. And I refuse to just exist.
And
I'm a
yeah,
live.
we got to put a cap on this one. But I know, even though we're out of time, without even consulting the listeners, the viewers, we know that you must come back. It is a must that you return to finish this story time. Does not allow us to go through anymore. But just like the stories, you get that part one and you're just hanging on to the edge of your seat, waiting for part two. I'm publicly
I know, and it
inviting you
sounds
back
like a
as
real
soon as
movie,
possible.
eh?
Huh?
I said it sounds like a real movie, right?
It does. Absolutely, it does. But again, I want to thank you so much for sharing a part of the story. I know there's more. We got to get into part two and some other things that you mentioned that are topics all by itself that I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of these things. But thank you so much, Anya, on behalf of myself. And of course, I'm seeing the viewers loving this today. The fact,
Anytime.
I think what is so heartwarming is that you're just as real as they come, and the fact that you have no inhibitions about telling the story, come what may. I think that is what's most refreshing more than anything else. Raisa says, girl, Anya, thanks for sharing. I hope other women become as brave as you. This one says, continue to be strong, ma'am. Thanks for sharing. And it goes on. This one is keeping you in prayer. And it goes
Thank
on.
you, everyone. I appreciate it. And my prayers go out to everybody on the feed. And if you know anybody you could share the information with, share it. And anytime you want me to come on Empress, I'm available. Just let me know.
Say nothing else. Say it. You don't have to say that twice. Folks, y'all know what to do. Keep it locked. Top of the hour, 5 o'clock. Your drive at 5 with yours truly. And DJ AI comes your way.
I'm kidding. I got a next one in MB.
Damn, girl.
Thanks, Empress.
I still in awe. I am still freaking in awe. Like, anyway, we'll talk later. You got me. You got me. I'll see
Be
you later.
safe.
Yes, you be safe.